Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, May 8th meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. Welcome to this meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. This board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We're always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under the regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting contains an opportunity for those attending to comment on items in the published agenda or on other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We hope that our meetings provide a useful opportunity for communication between the board and the community. And so thank you for attending. And with that, Ms. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Betsy Kelber-Baglio.
Here.
Beth Barron.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Jessica Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Here.
Michelle Tuck Ponder. Evelyn Spahn. Absent. Brian Liu.
Here.
Amy Wang.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And tonight, it's sort of a special and different type of meeting that we've been talking about having for a long time, and we have some things going on tonight that we made it a good time to do what I'm about to explain. Usually the purpose of tonight's meeting is only to approve our personnel agenda, which is after a year-long review process is coming up before the board, and we do this every year. But the board has also wanted to have a chance to discuss issues among ourselves. We meet in closed session sometimes on specific matters that are kind of structured in nature of what we can and can't talk about in closed session. So we wanted to take a little time tonight after the vote on personnel matters simply to discuss among the 10 of us things that we'd like to focus on, raise them among us, and raise to the attention of the public. And so that will be the bulk of our meeting tonight. In terms of public comment, we have a public comment section 1 coming up at item F, right after the superintendent's report. That will be 15 minutes. I see that we have a sign-up sheet for anyone who would like to participate. There are 4 people who have signed up, so roughly 3 minutes per person would be useful in terms of your comments. So that's really the scope of our agenda tonight. Is really limited in terms of our formal agenda, but hopefully we have a good discussion among board members about things that we've always wanted to talk about amongst ourselves and never really have the time with all the structure that we have in our monthly agenda to speak of. So with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent, and we'll be hearing more from the board, all of us later after the votes.
Thank you, Pat. I really don't have much of a report tonight other than to say that schools are not buildings, as much as we've been talking about buildings in the past few meetings. Schools are people. And the most important work that we do as administrators and as a board is to hire and nurture truly caring, knowledgeable, compassionate, reflective individuals who work each day with our students. And so tonight is an opportunity for us to celebrate the individuals who are in our classrooms, on our fields, coaching students, working with students after school, before school, the work that's gone into hiring them, the work that's gone into to nurturing them to be great teachers. It is not hard to be mediocre as a teacher. Being a great teacher is the hardest job in the world, and we have many great teachers here in Princeton, and I'm delighted to be able to have a meeting devoted to affirming them this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. So with that, we'll move to item G, and what we're going to do is have a motion and a vote on each item. Oh, public comment, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. So with that, we'll turn to public comment. There's 15 minutes, and we have 4 people, and I'll just mention it, and I'll even mention who's on next, just so you know, but it's Rod Montgomery, followed by John Chen, followed by Bernadette Alexander, and then followed by Dr. Sharma. So with that, Mr. Montgomery, if you can step up, and we all know you, but if you could just mention who you are and where you live, and
Rod Montgomery from William Patterson Court, curmudgeon taxpayer, and I forgot to wear my taxpayer shirt today. Sorry. I was going to issue some compliments first, but there's no time, so I won't. First topic I'd like to invite your attention is intentional experimentation to save money. I have raised this matter earlier, and the superintendent has expressed profound disinterest in doing anything merely to save money. I do, however, note this evening that you are already doing forced experiments when you make cuts forced by expenses rising faster than revenues. I think you can look forward to more forced cuts of that sort in the future, and I suggest that you consider making intentional experiments in the absence of that are not forced by cuts for the purpose of identifying opportunities, especially to save money while improving learning. Okay. Second item. You have a 5-year plan, which is a compendium of aspirations, but there are no budget numbers attached. Robert McNamara did many bad things, but one of the good things he did in the Department of Defense was institute a 5-year defense plan in which the budgetary implications of decisions made this year were carried into the future. I think you might find that that sort of thing would be helpful for your purposes as well. I also suggest that you do some financial planning in the operations budget to reflect the implications of the construction budget for which you are seeking approval in a referendum. In particular, I have profound misgivings about the glass roof maintenance horror for which you seem to be signing us up. Finally, getting back to the possibility of improving learning while cutting costs, and also addressing the high school students' stress levels. This board has every year for at least the past few years approved the use of EduCere, E-D-U-C-E-R-E, which is I think it is actually a clearinghouse for online courses. At least some of those courses at the high school level are student-paced. Student-paced learning is different from the lockstep cattle drive style of learning that you customarily practice. I've referred to the model as the feedlot model, in which you drive the students from class to class on a fixed schedule and use the cattle prod-like high-stakes numerical grades to motivate them to learn what you're pushing at them. If each student in the high school was taking one student-paced course, the student would have control over that part of his or her own schedule and would not be at the mercy of the staff to, for example, decide when there was too much work being assigned at a particular time period. There'd at least be a safety valve, relief valve.
So, Mr. Montgomery, I just had to give you time warning.
Yes, thank you. I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your hard work on behalf of Princeton students.
Mr. Chen.
I think I'm asking for the most favorable nation treatment in terms of time. I want to talk about the Cranberry relationship again, and unfortunately our Cranberry representative is not here. Here's how I think about the Cranberry situation, okay? And correct me if you think I'm wrong on this. So if I have a room in my house, I want to rent it out to someone, and it turns out when the lease expires, I cannot move him out, right? That person is not a tenant anymore. That person effectively is a partial owner of the house. I guess you know where I'm going with this. Cranberry is effectively a partial owner of our high school facilities. So in that sense, Cranberry should contribute its fair share to all the capital investment in our high school, starting with the $62 million high school renovation. And one thing I do notice that Cranberry actually can't afford it. I did a little bit calculation. Based on the average 15% of the high school enrollment, Cranberry's share of $62 million capital investment is about $9 to $10 million upfront, or $16.5 million over a 30-year period. That averages to just over $500,000 a year, which represents less than 2%. I think it's 1.6 or 1.8% increase of their tax base. So they can't afford it. I think a lot of the high school students were talking about we're all friends. I think let's all sit down like friends to friends. You don't let friends to subsidize the education of your kids. So I think all the Princeton residents want is a fair and equitable relationship with Cranberry. And I will go as far as say that it is our board's fiduciary duty to the township residents to actually seek such relationship. And second thing I want to say is that we need to make that demand, and if that demand is rejected by the Cranberry, I think we should still seriously looking into the option of terminating that relationship. I mean, last time there was an attorney talking about a certain legal procedure of going through that to terminate that relationship. And one of the key things that we talked about is the potential financial impact on the town, right? And Beth, you gave us example about the potential $2.8 million net loss if we terminate the Cranberry contract. Well, one key important sort of element of that arrangement is that even if we terminate the contract, we will continue to receive revenue from Cranberry students who are currently enrolled, which means that the $2.8 million loss only occurs at year 4. But then if we look at the school operating budget, even if the operating budget increase only at the 2% cap, and by the way, we've been breaching that cap every year almost in the past. We just passed a budget that's 4% increase. By year 4, the school budget will be over 8% higher than it's now, and that's over $7 million versus the potential $2.8 million loss. So to say that it's such a big gap we cannot manage, I'm puzzled about that. And more importantly, I think every time when someone say that Cranberry is 36% of our school's discretionary operating budget, the first question I had in mind is really, well, Princeton, we're one of the most affluent town in the state. We have one of the highest property tax rates in the state that has the highest property tax rate in the country. And we need to rely on a neighboring town's revenue to run our high school? Isn't that a bigger problem we need to think about?
Mr. Chen, I'm giving you a time warning, too.
That's fine. I think there are a lot of things we need to do about this Cranberry send-receive relationship. And I read the news that the board is about to renew that contract, renew that agreement. I think that will be the last thing we need to do right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you haven't seen, and I'll say this to the people in the public too, if you haven't seen the meeting of, I believe it was April 24th, there was an extensive discussion of the Cranberry relationship, including the legal constraints. I'm not sure if you saw that, Mr. Chen, because you're talking about doing something that's outside the law, but maybe anyone interested in Cranberry should go back and look at that recording and also the PowerPoint that's on our webpage. Okay, next, Bernadette Alexander.
Well, it's been 3 years since I'm trying to get into a board meeting, so I'm finally here tonight. And I realize this is an important evening because you have numbers of potential hirees or people you are reappointing for the 2018-2019 school year. So I just wanted to ask the board if you can tell me what percentage of those hirees are African American or Black and Brown is what my question is. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Goldstein, would you like to respond to that now?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. These are all reappointments of current staff. So are you looking for new staff that we're hiring and going into the second year?
I'm looking for new staff because that's what's been promised for the last 3 years that we're getting.
Okay, as far as new first-year staff that we have currently hired who are going into the second year, I'd be more than happy to get that information to you.
I do believe that 44% of our new hires this year were educators of color. I don't have that. I can try and look on my computer and see if I can get the breakdown for you of the percentage of African American teachers and other educators who were hired. But we have made a very concerted effort to increase the number of really wonderful educators of color who are within our school system so that it's more representative of our student body. Lou Goldstein, our director of, our assistant superintendent for human resources, made a week-long trip to historically black colleges and universities in the South. I went to Howard myself this year. We had educators of color hiring recruitment fair on, when was it, April?
It was the first week in March.
First week in March. And we had a number of people come to that. So we have made a very concerted effort, and we have seen results in this year of really hiring more educators of color, both in terms of teachers and also in terms of administrators. 3 of our last 4 administrators hired were, in fact, educators of color.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cochran. And last, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, and thank you, the board. So I definitely like to say thank you for all your hard work and dedication. I think it's in the interest of everybody to have a successful program. And having said that, but I believe still we can take a lot of good steps to make it happen. And the ultimate goal being to provide the best education to the school kids and everybody, but also at the same time optimize the cost so the burden to the taxpayer is minimized. So how do you achieve it? That is basically would like to say that there are a number of things we should do it, and we should have actually already done it. We should have a project plan, like, which is already published, and this is what our goals are, this is how we're going to achieve the program schedule, this is what the cost is, and this is, even though we have the cost numbers, now we do have the schedule also, but to educate the public so they don't kind of get a feeling that, what are we doing? So I will really strongly suggest we should have a project plan, and with a very detailed information in it. And you can take the guidance from Princeton University. They had before they went into the 10-year expansion plan, they have 168 pages of information, how they plan to do it, how they plan to achieve it, what it includes, even though it doesn't include the cost. But it's a good plan that the people can go and take a look at it. The other thing, how to make it happen, is equally important. And anytime you take a project like this, you should have a project leader right now, project manager, who should be working with the architects, with the designers, and with the public and everybody. So he's the single person who knows where the cost numbers come from, do we have a realistic schedule we're going to achieve, and also, most importantly, it's not just the building, as the superintendent said, it's the people. And you should look at it from a holistic perspective. Include of course, the public is involved, but also get the teachers involved. Everybody should be on the same page from day one. Because if you kind of continue to focus on one thing and leave the other part, then it's not a system. It won't work. So basically what I like to think about is look at it from a holistic perspective. And actually this was also highlighted was one of the students, and I talked with them later on, that the teachers should be part of it. Like not only said, oh yeah, they're there, but this is something new. How they're going to, get used to the new environment. And they should be, getting training for getting courses or getting learning regarding that. So those are the kind of things we really should be doing now, not wait until, and if unfortunately something goes bad, it still is a value added to it. Eventually we will get it done someday. So we really like you to, be proactive. That's what we really like you to do. The other thing is like, how do you, reduce cost? And I've been saying that, there are many ways. Like, sharing costs, like, the taxpayer pay the money to the municipality, to the schools, to the county. There's only one taxpayer, but there are three different versions of it. Like, schools get 80, 48, 50% of it. But there are maybe many opportunities, and I highlighted those with some of the board members, and I don't need to repeat them. And I hope, like, we can follow up on those things. And the other thing which I like to kind of also highlight will be the citizens' involvement. And I know Kip Cherry has been saying that they're there to help. And they're like, let's kind of let Kip and other people in the community make a kind of like a committee or something and bring all those suggestions in one place and talk about those. And you don't have to we don't have to only come to the board meetings. You can assign some board members, hey, go talk to such and such people and give responsibility so you can kind of make it more optimized and more efficient way. So those are the kind of things that I like to, I know I'm probably running out of time, but anyhow, I really like you to kind of think about things. Last one, I know a lot of time people bring the comments, and I always, being an engineer, take an action item. And you may not be able to answer that today. Take an action item and say, aha, this is the response from such and such. Put it on the board or send an email to them. So they feel that you listen to them and you responded to them. Next thing, they're your friends and they will be helping you. So having said that, and thank you again for having me. So
thank you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just comment very briefly that this process it's been over a year as we've worked through this, has had a lot of input from teachers, and in terms of the project plan, we fully intend to have fully detailed project plan with a project manager as we move forward. So, but we hear you on that. And now if we move to item G, where we will need some motions, and as I was starting to say before, each one of these G1 through 7 is a separate, 8, G1 through G8 is a separate motion and vote. So hopefully we can do this relatively quickly. Because we would like to adjourn by 9 o'clock tonight. So, with a discussion in the middle. So, motion for G1, Betsy, and the second Daphne. And are these all roll call votes, Ms.
They are, so I'll read them out.
Okay.
Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutz. Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn absent, not present. Greg
Yes.
and Michelle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, G2. Motion and a second, please. A motion, Jess, and a second, Debbie.
Can I ask a question? Mr. Goldstein, can you just differentiate for us end of assignment versus resignation? This is G2, correct?
Sure, end of assignment is largely those individuals who are hired as leave replacements, and they are on terminal contracts which end on June 30th. And the resignations basically is an individual choosing to resign at the end of their term or during the term of their contract.
Ready to take the vote?
Yes?
Yes. Patrick Sullivan,
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Ponder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, G3, motion and a second, please. Boy, without the technology, we can do this really fast. You notice that? So G3, anyone? Okay, Betsy, and a second, Debbie.
Okay. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Can't even read or speak. Michelle Tuck Ponder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on 4, correct?
We are on 4.
Yep,
Yes.
G4. A motion and a second, please. Motion, Debbie, and a second, Jess.
Okay. Pat Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
1 second.
Oops.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we are on 5.
Okay, G5, motion and a second, Greg, and a second. I think, did I see Daphne? Yes, I thought I saw your hand. Okay.
Not for that reason.
Okay, yeah. Just like at an auction, you raise your hand at an auction, you
Yeah,
might
that's
end
it,
up
it's yours.
owning something. Right, right.
Pat Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn is absent. Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder.
Yes.
Now we're on G6.
G6.
G6, motion, please. Beth, a second. Jess? Six,
Pat Sullivan.
yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes, however, I need to abstain. Do I say the letter and number?
Yes, please.
I need to abstain on A 18,
This is on resolution 6,
non-tenured PREA.
6A18, non-tenured.
6A 18, right.
6A18 is an abstain. It'll be noted as so in the minutes.
Okay.
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Jess Deutsch,
Yes.
Bill Hare,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn's absent, Greg Stankiewicz,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder.
Yes.
Okay.
May I ask another question? Process-wise, Mr. Goldstein, any resignations that have come in, the board does not vote to accept resignations? Or resignations of tenured or non-tenured staff? Do we vote on those? Okay. Okay.
Okay. G7. Greg, And a second, Debbie?
Greg. Debbie. Okay. Pat Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes, but I want to do a no for A9.
G7A9, no. Yes, balance.
Thank you.
Jess Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn, not present. Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder.
Yes.
Okay. One job description.
Yes, so this G8. Motion and second for that. Daphne? And a second, Betsy?
Can I ask a question? Can we get some background on the job description? Explanation. Mr. Goldstein, maybe? Could you explain the job description? Are we approving a new job, or is it somebody's that's being redone, or?
The person in this position is a current staff member, and they're just having a change in title to reflect the duties that they're actually doing.
Okay.
So what I'd like to say, I'm thinking about our personnel meeting, and this is part, so in our equity committee that we've started, we've talked about these roles within the district and really needing to think about the structure of this department. And so we asked to look at this job description again, along with the related job descriptions at the different buildings, so that there's a more cohesive, structural, integrated piece of how these positions will all work together. So this is one revision that there will be another
Additional
forthcoming
revisions.
for the next school year.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to make it, at least in the committee, we discussed making it a little more clear about who all of these people report to and actually what are the metrics around what they're doing. I think right now it's a bit vague, and so we're going to rewrite and resubmit to the board.
But also that their efforts are coordinated.
Yes,
and that
correct.
there's
Yeah.
similarity across schools in terms of what services are provided, and that they have better ways of communicating with one another.
Correct.
Right. Yeah,
Because these are essential, really critical roles within our district.
So this job description is a bit of a stake in the ground to establish the position, and then we'll go back and have a sort of crisper definition for the job, I think is the intent.
But would you say, personnel people, that these jobs aren't being coordinated now? And that equal services aren't being provided across all schools?
I don't know if we'd say equal as much as I think coordinated is probably the bigger issue. I think that there are people in those positions who are doing a yeoman's task, but they're not necessarily doing the same thing in all the schools. And so in order to ensure seamlessness and consistency, we want to get them all on the same page.
Yeah, and more seamlessness, because obviously the needs are completely different in the different schools, so they can't be doing the same thing. But more seamlessness and a lot to go with the equity committee. I mean, it's a whole area that we, as a board, are I don't know if the word's revamping, but really looking into.
And to look at the consistency of each of the job descriptions that of the roles that these people have right now, in what they do and who they report to and all of that.
And to make sure, I mean, bottom line, to make sure our students are getting what they need, and that if these positions need other things, we're making sure that's it. If these positions need to be broader, smaller, but, basically making sure the students are getting what they need.
Especially at the transitions that we know are difficult.
Yes.
Anyway.
How much can we say that the public is not in the dark about what it is we're talking about? Because it seems sort of inside baseball. Can we say what the job description is?
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a social worker and coordinator. And this person is currently at this position is currently at Princeton High School.
Okay.
It's publicly on the published.
Yeah, the agenda, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments on G8? So do we have a motion and a second? We did, right? Okay, so we're ready to vote.
Daphne and Betsy. Pat Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron. Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutz.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evan Nussbaum not present. Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
And Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Yes.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I'd just like to say point out a couple things. One, on Friday, the members of the Personnel Committee spent an entire day from 8:30 to 5 going through evaluations for many of our non-tenured staff. And then this process tonight, we also spent more time on Monday discussing some of the things that were on this personnel agenda. So we spent a lot of time in the last month working on this. We're all very proud, as Steve said, of our teachers and our other staff that deal with our children. They are the best. We think among the best in the nation. We're very proud of them. We're happy with all the labor contracts that we've just renewed for the next 3 years. We're happy with the piece and sort of the comedy between the board and all the labor unions. It's very exciting to be talking about all these improvements in such a way where we're all sort of rowing the boat in the same direction. So tonight is really personnel night, and we're just wanted to thank everyone who works with our children. What a terrific job they do. So thank you for that. And with that, we are turning to item H, which is a general discussion, which will last about, I think, 35 minutes roughly. And to talk about whatever really is on board members' mind. And so there's really no agenda at all. I think, I'll just start it out not by saying anything that's on my mind specifically, but I know we've spent a lot of time in this last year talking about buildings, space for people, how buildings are built, what they should look like, all of that. As Steve said tonight, schools are about people. And it might be worth spending a little time talking about the children, how they're doing, and what we can do to improve their lives. So with that, I'll open it up.
Well, perfect segue. Thank you, Pat. So I'll just jump right in there. Steve, Annie, I'd like an update on Steve's third quantitative goal, which is enhancing equity through response to diverse learners. By June of 2018, in an effort to continue to enhance the district's response to students with IEP and 504 plans, the superintendent, together with the director of student services and the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, will oversee the development, implementation, analysis of a survey regarding teachers' understandings of the legal requirements and instructional responses to providing accommodations required for students with IEP and 504 plans, and, based on the survey outcomes, develop specific benchmarks of professional practice and corresponding professional development activities to ensure legal compliance and enhance instruction. This goal is the first step in a 3-year plan to assess and enhance services for our students with identified needs and learning differences. So I would like an update on where we are with that, as June is fast approaching.
Sure. So Mickey actually spoke to all the administrators this morning about that survey. They have a draft of 20 questions. The plan is for the survey to be taken in department meetings. I think, is it next week, Annie, that the and then quickly calibrate those results and use those to determine professional development for the summer and for the future. Knowing that our goals for next year are differentiated instruction and culturally responsive teaching, we have already moved forward with putting in place some of the professional development that we think we're going to need. And Annie actually shared with the admin team today some of the workshops that teachers have proposed around special education topics. I don't know if you recall some of those.
We have teachers offering to teach classes on reading IEPs and responding to IEPs, ADHD, so differentiating or working with struggling learners in the regular education classroom. Some of them are subject specific. So we have a range. I think there were co-teaching was another one. There were 7 or 8 that are focused on our special needs population. So that we're already, in the process of getting those. into our Summer Institute, but the survey will also give us additional information.
Okay, great, thank you. I just know that we, myself included, we've all been focused on the buildings, and I just wanted to make sure, I didn't want to come to June and not have this addressed.
Me
so
either.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I do think there's another issue there that we've kind of pushed aside just because we're so busy with the facilities needs. And that's kind of looking at the student services department and how it operates. I mean, there was a great presentation 2-3 months ago from the special ed PTO chairs that really laid out a roadmap in so many ways about how to improve the services that children get. And I think I thought that was just such a timely presentation, and it was so spot on to what we were trying to deliver. I think still it's great that we're doing PD for these things, but I think from a systemic point of view, you hear over and over again that, you know, children with IEPs aren't, their teachers aren't looking at them or following them. You know, it seems that way in practice from a parent's point of view. That in terms of how to get attention for a child, it's a very hit and miss in terms of who you need to reach out to, and there's not a lot of, you know, institutional framework on how to do that, and so you go to the special ed PTO and you find out the sort of path to get there.
The Legend of Zelda, basically. Questions to ask.
It is like the Legend of Zelda, right? Yeah, exactly like the Legend of Zelda. That's what they said in the meeting, wasn't it? But so we need to look at that whole department and how they're delivering services, and I know they're all working very hard, but you know, sometimes when people are working that hard, we have to help them think about ways to work smarter. So that was on our agenda this year.
Right.
We do need to get to that. I don't think we've done too much on that yet, right?
Well, the board may not have been looking at that, but the department
Good,
has.
yeah.
And one of the things that the board did do, and I'm very grateful for this, was to approve the hire of Crystal Riddick, additional supervisor of special education, focused now 9 through 12, just at the high school. So we now have a supervisor for special education at the elementary level, the middle school, the high school level. Crystal just began with us maybe a month and a half ago, but already has jumped in, so we're able to have more observations in class, more work with teachers, more work with parents, more quicker communication, working with the child study team. So a lot of that work is happening, and I think we'll continue to as we keep evaluating our services. But the structure has been significantly improved by adding an additional supervisor at that level.
And for student achievement, we've asked Mickey to return. I think we're hoping for June to talk about what the structure is like now that there is an additional supervisor at the high school level, and what are the changes. We knew the changes that she proposed would happen, and so now now that we've had a few months of them all working together, seeing what actually has been able to be done and what their plans are for the future. So that's coming up soon.
Okay. I guess, Steve, I have a question. So the last board president on her way out the door said, you know, never blindside your superintendent. Always make sure. Always make sure.
This is your warning?
Yes. So, like, I didn't prep you on this, but one of the things I'd like to ask you is you know, Daphne read a list not too long ago of all the changes in the high school around the things that we've done to improve the climate and improve, you know, really make the education better, right, in many ways, but also to improve the emotional and the climate of stress in the high school. So we've done a lot of things. If we read that laundry list, it's quite long and impressive. But if you thought 5 years down the road, how do you think, how do things look different for a child 5 years from now than they are today, especially at the high school? But I mean, you can answer that however you want. But you know, what do you see as kind of the broader, your broader vision for where you'd like things to be 5 years from now?
Well, we have a 5-year strategic plan. We're 2 years into that, so I'll even look 3 years down the road. Wellness and balance is number one on our list. Knowing every child, closing the achievement gap, innovation in teaching and learning, and then communication, connectedness, and care. I'll begin with what I began with at the outset, that schools are not buildings, they're people, and schools are fundamentally about relationships. So when we talk about wellness, when we talk about knowing every child, when we talk about closing that achievement gap, even innovation and that connectedness, it all comes down to relationships. And I know that the high school this year is focused on, moving forward, they're focused on really strengthening the care and connection that teachers have with kids, and how do we get to know them? How do we get to know them as learners so we can differentiate instruction? How do we get to know them as people so we can incorporate their race and culture into our curriculum and ensure that children see themselves in the curriculum? Those are fundamental to all of our goals. So that work is going on already. Again, with the administrative team in the room today, we had conversations about the steps we have taken to increase the racial literacy of our staff. And the representation of race and culture within our curriculum. From a wellness standpoint, which is one of the things you were asking about, I look at the schedule change for the high school that's coming. Most high schools will take 2 or more years to make a schedule change. In a single year, we have put together something that I think is going to be really profound in terms of giving kids space to learn and grow and socialize and breathe within their day. So 2 days out of a 6-day cycle, students will have only 4 classes. Those will be longer periods. And we are working with the teachers, to your point, Dr. Sharma, to ensure that they know how to use that schedule to the maximum. So space and time and instruction all go hand in hand. The space is coming. We've to be congruent with the time that we're shifting our use of. So we're having those larger blocks of time. We're having in that 6-day cycle, there'll be 2 days of tiger time where students will get out at, their day will end at 2:30, but they'll still have an opportunity to go visit teachers. They'll have a period where they can visit teachers, where they can meet in clubs. So 2 days out of the week, they'll have those free periods to connect with each other, to connect with their teachers. But we're working with Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, who's actually internationally known consultant in sort of contemporary learning, to focus on how we can make learning more authentic for our students, more choice for them, where they're not just recipients of knowledge, but they're applying their knowledge in creative and authentic ways. We're assessing them in different ways, where it's not just midterms and finals and the pressure that comes with those, but where they have the excitement of creating a movie or choreographing a dance as a way of representing knowledge. So there's all kinds of changes coming in the way we teach, the way we use time, that I think are going to be fundamental to the wellness of our kids. We are talking still about reducing homework. I mean, there's some very simple things that I think that we can do. We've looked at the data. We were able to do that for our 9th graders. I think there was a reduction in homework for our 9th graders this year because we targeted and focused on that. I think we need to continue to do that and look at that across the grades. So I see us 3 years, 5 years from now in a space at the high school that allows for much more differentiated instruction, much more hands-on learning, different kinds of assessments. Quite possibly, midterms and finals will look very different, and we have more projects. I see kids being more engaged in the social learning aspects and collaborating, not feeling quite the pressure that they feel to compete with classmates, but there's the idea of small learning communities where they're coming together, working on authentic problem solving. All of those things I think are part of the vision that will support all 5 strategic planning goals.
So just a quick question. As you were saying all that, I just realized, isn't that all fundamentally incompatible with the AP, sort of curriculum and the way that they do things? It's all about testing. It's all about not being creative in the way you respond I mean, everything you listed, the APs are the opposite of that. So how do you run a school with so many APs if you're...
So the College Board is actually getting that message. Some of their new courses, and they're revising their courses so that they have more depth. I think one of the conversations that I had with Mr. Snyder today, he actually sent me links about focus on deeper learning. Because you're right. Like if the way the APs have been written, there's a a rush to the test, which is, and it's a lot of regurgitation of knowledge. The teachers feel the pressure to sort of disseminate that knowledge, and the students aren't always doing as much as they could to authentically represent their learning.
And yet, just sorry to interrupt you, but like students tend to brag about the APs they're in, and that's like the be-all and end-all to being in so many APs. And they're not, it doesn't sound that exciting to me. I wouldn't want to take that kind of class. You know, I don't have to take anything now, but if I wanted to take a class, it wouldn't look like that, right? You know, so why do we have this fetish around APs if they don't sound super exciting to me? So are we going to de-emphasize them, or are we just going to have the AP, let the AP evolve into our curriculum? How does that work?
No, I think first of all, it's the school and the colleges and the parents and the kids themselves. We can control as much as we can control. I think that our focus on joy and purpose as a mission, if students are thinking about that, if parents are thinking about that when they select courses, and it's not just about success is getting into an Ivy League school, but success is, you know, feeling excited about the learning in which I'm currently engaged, that we might start to see a de-emphasis on I need to take 3, 4, et cetera, APs, and that AP arms race might diminish.
Here's another, and I'm going to stop talking, but so you sort of implied just there that taking a lot of APs gets you into an Ivy League school, and if we think that Ivy League schools are really the best, but you sort of said, like, oh, there'll be a de-emphasis on getting into Ivy League schools, and therefore parents will not, you know, stress APs for their children so much, or therefore children won't stress APs for themselves so much. But again, they don't sound that great to me. When you tell me, like, all the great things that you just said is like this wonderful education's coming in the next 3 to 5 years, and then I think about an AP course which is the opposite of that. Why would I want to take the opposite of that to get into these so-called great schools?
All right, let me just clarify. I'm not sure APs have to be the opposite. Remember, we go back to it's the teacher in the classroom. It's the social interaction of students with that teacher engaged in material. So teachers are making choices all the time. I think that our teachers like to be able to go in depth in learning with students, and they're taking that AP curriculum, and they are many of them making it really engaging for our kids. They're making choices about what they're going to focus on, and the students are able to learn the content, but learn it in meaningful and engaging ways. So I'm not saying that every AP class has to be drill, kill, and drudgery. I mean, I think some of our students can speak to that. I think our teachers would like to have, you know, more time to go into greater depth on content, and I think the College Board is starting to rethink the AP curriculum and provide maybe fewer objectives and more depth and more creative projects. That change may be coming. My reference to the Ivy League schools and the colleges was really a sense of the pressure that I think our parents and students feel that in order to get into a good school, that they have to take this really rigorous, highly rigorous curriculum with lots of APs. And I think that we would be better served, having been an admissions officer for an Ivy League school and read countless applications. You can find students who have that intellectual curiosity, who's have a voice, who are engaged in ways that are different outside of the classroom. And so you're looking for those students who can talk in depth about a topic as opposed to those who have just checked as many boxes as possible. That's the focus we want to be able to have, is to give that sense of joy and purpose for our kids in their learning.
And that's great, because one of the things I want to talk about, I just read an article about how the vocational education, students who are engaged in the trades can make a very good living. And one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about in the school district is about academic excellence, which is a wonderful thing. But what we don't talk about is the diversity of preparing students for life. So how many students do we have at Princeton High School who attend Mercer County Vocational School? Do we know? Does anybody know?
No, but we're developing closer and closer relationships with them. We actually have some courses that are now being taught by Mercer County at Princeton High School. I believe criminal justice and psychology are new courses that where they're going to be teaching those here. And I'm going to lateral to Jess at some point. You can talk about the Mount Vernon School District and the technical education, career technical education program that you saw, because she and I were talking on the way down here to the meeting about how well that could translate into the vision that we have for the students here in Princeton.
But I'm going to stop there, because I think that part of the challenge is, and I appreciate that we will have courses at Princeton High School. When we talk about that AP culture kind of being destructive, the anti-vocational education culture is also one that discourages students from pursuing learning in that area. And so, you know, while we have this great discussion about APs and all that stuff, I want to make sure equal time is given to talking about.
I agree. No, Michelle, I agree with you 100%. So
I want to jump in and encourage all of us to take a look at the Vernon School District, because I had an opportunity to hear a presentation through New Jersey School Board Association last week, and I was so excited to hear what they talked about. And it's a different community than ours, but it's a community where the major employer is a ski mountain. So unless I'm totally mistaken, we don't have a ski mountain here. But Vernon was bringing people from all over the country to work the mountain, to make snow, to do everything required to run the mountain, because there was nothing happening at Vernon, in the Vernon School District, that had any relevance to this major employer. And what that became was an opportunity to reimagine what was happening in the schools. And what they're doing there is it's not an either-or proposition, so it's career and technical education built into the high school. In many ways, the same student is doing a technical track and also taking an AP in some cases. But it's really about empowering students for their preferred futures, as opposed to a preconceived notion of what their futures needed to look like. It's very, very exciting. And so the pathways that are being pursued through, and these are agreements that are between the school district and the county college and local employers, and so they're preparing students who leave that school system either for further education or to work directly, because there's sort of different paths you can choose. But the paths include, I'm going to just read them here: allied health, engineering, graphic design, hospitality, marketing, cosmetology, music production, and there are more in the works. And so the person who I saw present was, he was the, I'm going to get this right, he was the director of the district preschool, he was the music supervisor, and the director of special projects for the high school that was coordinating this effort. And they were the linkages are even bringing the preschools to meet the high school students who are working in the training programs for these industries. So it's all integrated, and it's not either AP or technical. It's what are you excited about doing, and how does that connect with what you do at school? And so Vernon is willing to come and talk with us in Princeton, and I mean, obviously, you know, again, we don't have a mountain, so the particulars are different, but I think we have a lot of potential in this community to think about the ways we can make these kinds of connections, so that what we're talking about at school is meeting the objectives that we're talking about in terms of wellness and purpose, and also being really creative about the way we create these pathways. So I was really excited to see that, and I'm hoping that we can learn more about it. And when we talk about reimagining education, I think that's the kind of thinking that that we can do, that doesn't eliminate any possibility for students, but creates more opportunity for all of our students.
So if I can jump on that a little bit more. So one of the things that we've been talking about with Jason Burrow at the middle school and Tim Charleston, our supervisor for global education, is, and you can Google this one, Paxton Patterson. So we have a wood shop at the middle school, and Paul Salka, our wonderful teacher, is retiring, and as we look to the future, we're thinking, well, is there a way that we can incorporate the hands-on of woodshop with maybe some other kinds of hands-on experiences for our students? So Paxton Patterson is a company that makes modules designed for middle school, so alternative energy, audio communications, digital music, electricity and electronics, flight technology, forensic science, home maintenance systems, hospitality tourism, intro to child development, intro to computer science, culinary arts, mnemonics, robotics, structural engineering, virtual architecture. These are all like modules that students would do in small groups of 2 or 3, and they might spend a week or 10 days on a module, then move to another one. So these are the kinds of things that we're talking about for even as early as next year. Maybe it'll be a year down the road, certainly with the 5-6 school. One of the things we're looking at there is, where does coding and robotics and the STEM fields come into play? And all of that ties back into, the career and technical education possibilities.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to add, too, is one of the very cool things that was described that's been really effective in Vernon has been that they did an asset mapping of the faculty of the school district. So looking at skills and interests of the faculty outside of what they're already teaching, and that led them to find that there was, for example, a history teacher who had worked in all the trades in the military and was able to develop curriculum around areas outside of their, what they've been focused on in the classroom. And so it's not even necessarily bringing in new teachers, but using those strengths and resources of the staff that were kind of just unknown before they did this mapping. So asset mapping of the faculty. I'm going to put in a plug for that.
And as long as we fully access Mercer County, because that's I think, a great resource.
Yes, it's a terrific resource.
We don't always take full advantage of.
And if we could marry that sort of broader curriculum with every student that gets out of this institution know how to ask good questions. Like if you ask for nothing else other than that,
that's true.
If you could just get people to ask good questions, if they're doing aircraft maintenance and they're asking good, like that is a life skill that will make them valuable, or a coder and they're asking the right question, and just
that's it.
Training people to think and question instead of like training them to get the right answer on an AP test is so valuable. I mean, that's really, I think, what higher education, but high quality education should really be about in the 21st century, is knowing how to ask those questions.
And just to that point, and when Annie and I teach new teachers, for example, new teacher orientation, or we're going to be doing a course on curriculum writing this summer for teachers who are writing curriculum. We always begin with what is an essential question, and how do you craft that? And so the idea of getting our teachers to pose really powerful, meaningful questions for our students is the first step to having them understand how to ask them themselves. So it's not, what are the causes of the Civil War, but is the Civil War still being fought today? And those are the sorts of questions we're using to frame the courses that we're teaching, and hopefully training or helping our students ask the same kinds of questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, questions that are generative, that cut across disciplines, and that have meaning for the course content, but meaning for students personally.
Well, I don't know how you get that into the culture, because I think our culture, in student reps, you can always chime in here if you can get a word in, but having a culture that does that. So I'll give you just a funny story. At my college, that was one of the things that they did a lot with, and I have a college classmate who now teaches music at Princeton. So he went back to college to give a hour and a half, presentation of his music. And so after the first piece was done, hands shot up, and they said, "Is it too soon to start asking questions?" There's a music.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the culture of asking questions. Like, how do you develop that? Because again, I think our kids are more worried about being right, getting the accolades or the prize, but not.
Let's ask our students. You want to jump in on this question?
Actually, so one thing that I was thinking about is you're talking just about like how teachers integrate different forms of teaching into their courses, despite it being AP. Just like the differentiation between the STEM courses and the humanities. So there's a lot of like project-based learning. Like we had a court trial of Genghis Khan in my world history class, and that was really cool. And we do like a lot of projects within in the humanities. So despite the fact it was AP world history, my teacher like made the effort to like integrate a project. But then in the sciences and math, it's much harder to do that just because like the curriculum is so much more rigorous and teachers are really pressed for time to really get through the material and prepare students for the AP. So I think with regards to math and STEM, AP is kind of incompatible with the vision that you do have in 5 years. And that's a generalization, but I think for the most part, that's true. So I think when you do try to break it down, you would have to do it like almost course by course in order to get like a more applicable and better solution.
And Amy and Brian, what about the eagerness and ability of students to pose questions to their teachers or to each other or to the world?
Yeah, again, if you want to speak on that.
Well, like for my experience in a lot of my classes, there's a lot of engagement by the students. So I definitely think like if like many students are often a bit more hesitant to speak up because I guess shyness, but if like I've definitely seen like a lot of classes open up as soon as a teacher starts leading in a discussion, and many students just start one by one, they start participating more, and I've definitely heard some very interesting insight given by my peers there.
Yeah, and again, I think that's really focused in the humanities, like GovPol class, we have really great discussions, and then in math, the questions are like, can we go over number 39? And then that's all we do. So, like, you know, again, like math, the sciences, like very different from the humanities in terms of what teachers can do.
Yeah, interesting.
I just wanted to say something about the vocational school, and as we go down that path, it looks like we're increasing it more. Let's just be sure that we're not tracking kids. I remember this movie, Beyond Measure. I saw it at JW a few years ago, and it was about this charter school in Colorado or somewhere in the Midwest, and it was talking about how they're preparing their kids for something other than college. And there was a mom there, and she said, yeah, when they're talking about that, they're not talking about their kid. And so as I sit here, right, I mean, I want to make sure that all children are being offered the same opportunity, and that we don't track kids who we don't have expectations to go to college and take that dream away from them. And so I hope you keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So I think part of that is looking at it, we have a pre-K through 12 system. So our goal should be, let's look early. How do we expose our elementary school kids to everything, to the sciences, to the arts, to the environment, to poetry, to dance? What do we do at the middle school to ensure that all of our kids are getting the exploratories, the STEM education, and then hands-on kinds of experiences, so that when they get to high school, they already have a background in that and they can continue to flourish. And a lot of those, I mean, there's a lot of rigor in the courses that I know, the career technical education courses and the courses I was describing here through Paxton Patterson. There's a lot of intellectual rigor. It's engineering design kinds of things. So it's great for all kids and provides multiple pathways to success, which I think is part of, I know when you're doing your alumni panel, which is coming up,
13th.
I just feed you the line. Go ahead. I mean, it's about multiple pathways to success, and you're bringing back alumni from Princeton High School who are doing lots of different things and have found different pathways towards that. So I don't know if you want to speak to.
Sure. So I was actually going to send an email to you guys later tonight on that topic, but we've had 5 alumni confirming that they'll be coming, so it's really exciting. And like, they're students who have done really different things, and they sent us like just brief descriptions of what they did after Princeton High School. So a lot of people talked about, like, you know, not really being happy with going to college, and then just like, you know, with their college experience, but then finding that like no matter where they went, ended up being a good experience for them, and that like it prepared them, that PHS prepared them really well. We have people talking about career changes, that they started off in music but then became a lawyer and is now in law school. So just the idea that you don't have to stay on one track for the entirety of your life. You don't have to have it all decided right now. So I think those are just like a lot of stories that we're featuring, and it's just really exciting. And I'll send out more information in an email. And I guess just on the other point, it sounded really pessimistic about like the STEM fields, but I think there's a lot of room to do projects, especially in those areas. It's just a little bit harder because it's a regimented curriculum because of AP. So I think if there were like maybe a more concerted effort to have the department in general, like in math class, we had the block periods during midterms, and we were able to do some really creative things. So I think there needs to be a push for that in STEM, really. So yeah, I guess it's not just we can't do it, it's just that there needs to be more effort put into it.
And there is STEM in the trades. I mean, just because you work with your hands doesn't mean that you're not doing science and technology and all that.
I was talking about the vocational track versus a college track, and just not putting someone on a track because you might have assumptions about what they can achieve.
Right, but my husband went to a vocational high school and he went to college, so he went to college down the street. So it's not necessarily because you studied trades that you don't have an academic background either. So.
On a separate note, but I'm actually motivated by our student voices because I think we always it's wonderful to hear from our students, and I think about the quotes that we had up when we had the referendum presentations from our students, and I'm thinking if we could try to access middle school and elementary school voices. Maybe we do some listening sessions at those levels. It may be because I taught those levels or because my children are at those levels, but I know they have a lot to say as well. And I think as we think about their education and as we think about, the projects coming up, I just think it'd be really interesting. So maybe that's something we can try to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
You never know what we're going to learn.
And if I can just jump in on student voices as well, and Amy, I think it sounds fantastic. So thanks for organizing that. And I think that's a really good example of the great work that so many of our students are doing already. And I'm always sort of taken aback by the honesty, the ferocity, the bravery of our student voices. So I heard some of them at others of us here have at the Hear Me, See Me conference, but then there was in so many other instances. And some of what they say is not easy for me as a board member to hear, but it's important. And I think that's a marker of a strong system, educational system that allows them to do that. And just if I could take 30 seconds, there was, in the student newspaper, there was an editorial about the referendum. And I know I, as a board member, is not supposed to say, so this is not my words. I'd like to read just some words that really moved me and the power of what was done. So I'm just going to take 30 seconds, if that's okay. And I actually, it's an unsigned editorial, so I don't know who wrote it. I think, I've heard some, but whoever it is, this is the product of what goes out every month to our students and their families. And so I'm just going to read the last paragraph. We recognize the concern of community members frustrated by the proposed tax increase. They are our parents. They are our neighbors. However, community members consider not just the current students of PHS, but the future generations that will, due to overcrowding, be unable to receive the education they deserve as a birthright in this country. Thus, we, the current classes of PHS, call upon the broader community to come together and work to maintain a value deeply ingrained in the sinews of our community, a top-tier public education for every future class of PHS. I wish I were that eloquent, and so I just wanted to add that as evidence of the wonderful students that we're privileged to work for.
Thanks, Greg. Well, I promised to wrap up at 9 o'clock, but if anyone else has any last comments before we go, this is your chance. Yeah, Beth, go ahead.
I had a number of procedural things I wanted to talk about governance, but that is really not, after all of this, I really think we can talk about that separately. The one thing I did want to mention to the board is that I've been speaking with a number of people in the community about some philanthropy and ways that people may be able to support the referendum and somehow make some of it a bit easier on some of the taxpayers and perhaps invest in the project and participate in this transformational thing that's happening in our community. And I have to say, after working on this the last few months, I'm very excited. And so I decided to spend a few days kind of dreaming and thinking and talking to people about how exciting this is. And I have to say I've had some really good response. And I'd just like to ask anyone at the board level, if you have ideas about people who might want to participate on a committee or people who you may think would be willing to consider supporting the project in ways beyond simply paying their taxes and being part of something that's going to transform this town, I think, in the way that our library building has transformed the town. I know when I moved to Princeton and I first saw that public library. It was one story, dusty parking lot, dark, dank building. You would go in there and see the dust motes, flying down from the windows. And what that building became, I think nobody could have imagined. And I feel that what we're trying to do with our schools is going to have a similarly transformative effect on our community. So if you have any ideas or suggestions, you want to give them to me, and I'll try to pass them on to the people that are going to work on this. I would be grateful. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Pat,
Any last
sorry.
comment? Go ahead, Greg.
I'm sorry, just very briefly, and I'll actually put most of it off to a later time. But it's a great sort of segue from what Beth said as well. I was able to go last week to the National Conference on Community Schools, the Community Schools National Forum. It's held once every 2 years, and I just wanted to very briefly sort of throw out a couple of things. As we think about the buildings, and we've heard that from Dr. Sharma today and from a lot of other members of the public, that we shouldn't just focus on buildings. We should focus on what goes on in the buildings as well. And just very, very briefly, there were a couple of things that really touched me. One was that there's 2,000 schools across the United States, in every state right now, that is following the community school model, which is a model based on focusing on equity and trying to provide opportunities to all our students. And there's so many great examples and models there for us to learn from. And I know we're already doing that. We're already reaching out to community members who are involved in the nonprofit service providers who do so much for us already. But we're going to try, the people who are on the design committee, to bring back some more of these models for the community to consider. And that reminded me, because some of the things that we heard there as well was some of the great support from foundations and from other partners in this movement across the country. So there were 2,000 people in Baltimore last week. In 20 years, it's gone from 150 to 2,000. So they now call it Community Schools version 4 over these 20 years. So it's something that's already happening, but I think it's so amazing. It underscores the importance of public education, and I'm really, really excited about all of us having a chance to think about these things and look at some of these models for us, for the future, for the 5-6 school and for all our schools here in Princeton. So thanks, Pat.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Pat,
Okay.
can I make one really quick?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
We almost did it. We almost
Yeah.
did it. I learned today that today is National Teacher Appreciation Day. I found that political and education leaders began talking about a day to honor our teachers in 1944. And in 1953, Eleanor Roosevelt convinced the Congress to proclaim National Teacher Day. So I'm not sure why it took 9 years to do that, but education, as in all important endeavors, I guess things take time. But I just want to take a moment to appreciate our teachers on this day.
That's great.
It's funny that it was our personnel vote.
We did
Teacher
that on purpose,
Appreciation
of course.
Day. Exactly.
Everybody knew that. Okay, well, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Yes, Beth, sorry. And a second? Debbie? All in favor?
Sorry, who was first?
Beth?
Beth? And Debbie?
Yep.
Okay.
All in favor? Okay, Maria's adjourned.